Mia Dawson, an 8-year-old girl with a gentle smile, usually bright enough to rival the Montana sunshine, found herself trembling by a lonely back road in the remote stretches of Ravenwood Valley. The late afternoon sun was waning, casting elongated shadows across the forest edges and giving the mountain peaks in the distance a gold-tinged glow. Yet for Mia, lost and unsure of how to reach her grandmother's farmhouse, the light felt like it was slipping away far too quickly, replaced by a creeping dread that knotted in her stomach. Each time the breeze rustled through the pines, she glanced over her shoulder, half expecting a predator to emerge from the undergrowth. Her once clean jeans were scuffed with dirt and streaked green from skidding through moss, while her scraped palms reminded her of how clumsy she had been when chasing a rabbit into the woods. She had never meant to wander so far from home, but once the rabbit sprinted off, curiosity tugged her deeper and deeper between towering trees. When she finally realized the sun was sinking and she was alone, terror seized her. Mia huddled near the edge of an unpaved road that cut through the valley floor, her heart racing each time she thought she saw a flicker of movement among the ponderosa pines. "Grandma Camilla," she called, her voice cracking around the edges. "Where are you?" Only the whistle of an impending evening breeze answered, carrying the scent of pine needles and the faint hint of oncoming rain. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand and took several shaky breaths, trying to muster the courage she sensed she no longer had. Mia was not accustomed to feeling this helpless. She was the sort of child who climbed tree branches to read books or to watch birds up close. But even that intrepid spirit buckled under the weight of pure isolation in the darkening wilderness. She was about to call out again when she heard something that made her freeze, a soft rustle just within the tree line. Her body tensed as a large shape materialized from the thickening shadows. A German shepherd, with a sturdy build and a keen, alert stance, padded onto the dirt road. Mia felt her breath catch. The dog's ears stood upright, and across its muzzle was a thin scar that looked slightly silver in the failing light. Even more surprising, it wore a tactical vest with compartments and insignias that looked official, though worn and faded. Before Mia could fully absorb the sight, a second dog appeared, then a third, until 6 of them flanked the road in a loose formation, each clearly well-muscled, disciplined, and similarly outfitted with specialized gear. The lead dog, the one with the scar on its muzzle, seemed the largest. Later, Mia would come to know this imposing shepherd as Hira, but for now, it was simply a mysterious presence that both fascinated and frightened her. Instinct might have told a child to run at the sight of 6 large German shepherds emerging from the darkening forest, but Mia was too stunned to act on anything but trembling curiosity. She pressed her back to a scraggly pine, swallowing a lump that burned at the back of her throat. Were these dogs about to attack? Why were they wearing tactical vests? Fear was a second heartbeat inside her chest, and tears, which she had tried to stifle, began to slip down her cheeks anew. Then, without warning, the dogs moved in a coordinated way that Mia could never have anticipated. They formed a circle around her, each one facing outward as though protecting her from an unseen threat lurking just beyond the flickering shadows of the pines. For a few seconds, Mia's confusion and fear soared to a new height. But as she braced for something terrible, Hera approached her with measured steps, nose quivering as it tested the air around her. Mia braced her arms over her face, letting out a small whimper that broke the stillness. But instead of growling or barking, Hera sat down within arm's reach, gazing at the child with an intensity that felt peculiarly gentle, intelligent even. One by one, the other shepherds settled into a seated posture as well, maintaining that curious circle, but making no move to harm her. Their calmness was almost surreal, a far cry from the ferocity Mia had associated with guard or attack dogs. It was as if they recognized she was vulnerable and needed care. With trembling fingers, Mia reached out and barely brushed the rough fur on Hera's shoulder. The dog closed its eyes for a moment, as though in silent approval. Something in Mia's chest loosened. She wasn't sure why, but she believed these dogs did not intend to hurt her. Her tears still clung to her eyelashes, but her breathing slowed to a more manageable rhythm. "You're good dogs, aren't you?" she whispered. Although her voice was soft, all 6 sets of ears twitched as if they heard every syllable perfectly. The uncertain peace between them lasted until headlights broke over a distant bend in the road. The dogs, previously focused on Mia, immediately stood. In a swift but silent formation, they positioned themselves between Mia and the approaching vehicle. Hera, the scarred lead shepherd, stood nearest the truck's trajectory, muscles tensed, but posture eerily controlled. Mia peeked around the ring of dogs to see an old, dark-colored pickup rolling to a halt about 30 yards away. The driver's side door opened, revealing a tall, lean man who exited with a cautious but deliberate pace. He wore a heavy jacket and boots that had seen better days. His name was Dr. Elijah Carter, and he had once been an Army combat medic before retreating to these remote woods. He had come into Ravenwood Valley months earlier, seeking isolation and a quiet life away from the stress of conflict zones. Yet the moment Dr. Carter laid eyes on Mia, huddled among a pack of obviously military-trained German shepherds, an uneasy jolt of recognition fluttered through him. The faded patches and pouches on the dogs' vests spoke to a tier of specialized training he knew all too well. Memories he'd tried to bury threatened to resurface. Stepping carefully closer, he addressed Mia from a safe distance. "Hey there," he said gently, raising his hands in a non-threatening gesture. "Are you all right? Where's your family?" Mia emerged from behind Hera's flank, her voice cracking as she answered, I got lost. I think my grandma's house is somewhere back that way." She gestured lamely toward the woods. "I've been looking forever." Dr. Carter's gaze flicked to the dogs, who were still forming a shield around the child. He recognized the disciplined stillness of canines that had once been part of a top-tier military program. These weren't ordinary rescue animals or retired bomb sniffer dogs from a local K-9 unit. Their gear, their formation, and the way they obeyed invisible cues pointed to something else entirely. Slowly he crouched, making himself smaller and less imposing, extending a hand palm out toward the lead shepherd. "Easy now," he murmured, heart pounding. "I think I might remember you. Hera?" The dog's ears perked at its name, and that subtle sign was all Dr. Carter needed to confirm his suspicions. It felt like stepping back in time, to a place he'd tried to forget. Hera sniffed Dr. Carter's hand, then pressed her muzzle into his palm in a quiet form of recognition. What are you doing here?" he muttered, eyes darting to the other shepherds. He couldn't fathom a scenario where not just Hera, but 5 other dogs from the same advanced project would be let loose in rural Montana without a single handler in sight. Mia sniffled again, tugging at the frayed ends of her overall straps. "They saved me, I think," she said softly, as if afraid the story wouldn't be believed. "They were just there when I was crying, and they didn't hurt me. They helped." In that moment, Dr. Elijah Carter felt a strong sense of conviction. Something monumental was transpiring in this valley. Whatever these dogs were, and however they had ended up here, they had shielded a lost child from danger. That alone was remarkable, but their gear and the faint recollection drifting through Carter's mind told him there was far more to this story. Casting a glance at the darkening skyline, he realized nightfall was imminent. "We need to get you home," he said, ushering Mia gently toward his truck. "Your grandmother must be frantic." The dogs quietly padded behind them, Hera ensuring Mia was always between her and Dr. Carter, as if to say, "If you make one wrong move, we'll be ready." Carter opened the passenger door for Mia, and she climbed in, relief visibly flooding her face. Meanwhile, the other shepherds leapt into the bed of the truck with a silent, disciplined grace that set Dr. Carter's nerves on edge. This was not standard behavior. With the engine's rumble, the headlights spearing through the forest gloom, Dr. Carter drove off toward the Dawson farmhouse, uncertain of what awaited him, but certain that Ravenwood Valley would never be the same. In the descending twilight, the search party at Camilla Rowan's farmhouse was a hive of anxious energy. Located on a modest spread called Cedar Grove Farm, the classic wooden structure stood at the end of a winding driveway lined by century-old pines. Camilla, Mia's grandmother, had assembled neighbors, friends, and the local deputy to scour the surrounding fields and woodlands for any sign of her missing granddaughter. Flashlights danced across every fence post, ditch, and bush, and the hum of worried voices underpinned by the occasional crackle of a police radio filled the cool evening air. Camilla, tall and silver-haired with a determined chin, had always been the unshakable matriarch of the Dawson family, but on this night, fear etched itself into every line of her face. Each time a new searcher returned with a shake of the head, her heart clenched with dread. When the rumble of an approaching truck finally filtered across the gravel drive, everyone turned as one body, flashlights swinging toward the intrusion. Relief came as the beam of the headlights illuminated Dr. Elijah Carter's pickup, rolling slowly toward the farmhouse. The moment the vehicle stopped, Mia flung the passenger door open and sprinted into Camilla's waiting arms. Tears of gratitude stained Camilla's cheeks as she hugged her granddaughter tightly. "Oh, Mia," she whispered, "my darling girl, where on earth have you been?" Before Mia could answer, the back of the truck caught everyone's attention. 6 pairs of alert canine eyes peered over the truck bed's rim, each dog still clad in that puzzling tactical gear. Neighbors drew back instinctively, uncertain if these large, muscled German shepherds posed a threat. One of them, Zeus, let out a soft, low whine, eyes locking on Mia to ensure she was still safe. Camilla, after confirming her granddaughter was unhurt except for minor scrapes, rose to confront Dr. Carter. She recognized him only by reputation, a somewhat reclusive doctor who had purchased an old property on the outskirts of Ravenwood Valley. "You brought my granddaughter home," she said, voice trembling with gratitude and a hint of confusion. "I don't even know how to thank you, but I need to know, what are those dogs doing here?" Dr. Carter cleared his throat, not entirely sure how to answer. "It's complicated," he started, casting a quick glance back at the silent row of shepherds. Hera, the lead dog, had hopped down from the truck bed and now stood near Mia with a protective air. A few search party members and a local rancher named Samuel Granger stepped cautiously closer, eyeing the dog's tactical vest and muscular frame. Granger, a retired Marine with a keen eye, sucked in a sharp breath. "Carter," he said in a hushed tone, "these aren't normal K9 units. That gear, that stance, I've seen something like it before. Maybe specialized military dogs, force recon, or something higher level." Camilla's expression darkened with worry. "I don't understand. Why would they be out here?" Mia, still clinging to her grandmother's arm, piped up with surprising calm. "They found me, Grandma. They surrounded me so nothing could hurt me. I think they knew I was lost. And then, Dr. Carter came and brought me home." Her voice wavered, but she looked at Hera with genuine awe, as if grappling with the magnitude of these shepherds' actions. Just as Dr. Carter was about to offer a more detailed explanation, the roar of other engines disrupted the tense quiet. 2 sleek black SUVs barreled up the gravel drive, stopping just short of the crowd. Doors swung open, and 4 men in civilian clothing stepped out, though their rigid postures and scanning eyes betrayed a military background. In the shifting beams of flashlights, their leader, a tall man with graying temples, advanced with a calculating gaze. He carried himself with an unmistakable authority. Colonel Nathan Mallory. At least, that's the name Carter remembered from half-forgotten documents and hush-hush discussions in specialized training labs. The sight of Mallory here, at Camilla's farm, sent a prickle of unease down Carter's spine. Mallory flashed a badge-like credential so quickly that no one had time to read it properly. "Good evening," he intoned, voice cool. "We received word about a group of military working dogs gone astray in this region. We're here to retrieve them." His eyes flicked from Mia to Hera, and then to Dr. Carter, recognition sparking. "And I see we have found precisely the dogs in question." Deputy Josh Parker, the county officer assigned to help with the missing child search, bristled. "Excuse me, sir, but this is private property. We have a missing minor who was just located, and we're still in the process of verifying all relevant details. We'll need your identification and a formal statement." Mallory sidestepped the deputy with the practiced ease of someone who operated outside normal jurisdictions. "These dogs belong to a classified government program. They are the property of the United States, and I'm here under direct orders to retrieve them." His gaze lingered on Mia, prompting Camilla to step forward defensively, placing herself between Mallory and her granddaughter. Hera, meanwhile, let out a subtle growl under her breath. The sound was low enough that only Mia and Dr. Carter, standing close, caught it. To everyone's surprise, the other 5 dogs, Zeus, Artemis, Ares, Thor, and Freya, formed a broader, quiet semicircle. They made no overt threats, but there was no mistaking that they were ready to act if the colonel or his men made a move on Mia. "I'm sorry," Dr. Carter said firmly, "but these dogs aren't exactly in condition to be retrieved. They've obviously been through something. Besides, I'd like to see official documentation that you're authorized to take them." A flicker of irritation crossed Mallory's features. "Doctor, is it? You should understand that matters of national security supersede local protocols." Then he turned to Deputy Parker with a cold stare. "You can file whatever local paperwork you see fit, Deputy, but I have federal jurisdiction here. These animals are part of an ongoing investigation. We appreciate your cooperation in releasing them." Camilla, still holding Mia's hand, squared her shoulders. "Whatever your jurisdiction might be, Colonel, they helped save my granddaughter's life tonight. That merits some explanation before anyone surrenders anything." She was not an easy woman to intimidate, especially when it came to protecting family. Mallory's men tensed, scanning the scene like they expected sudden resistance. One of them reached for the tranquilizer rifle strapped in the back of the SUV. But Hera and the other shepherds seemed to sense the motion before it even happened. They adjusted their stance, alert and unwavering, yet not attacking. The tension was palpable, sparking like static in the crisp Montana air. Then, a pair of headlights approached from the main road, bouncing over the uneven terrain. The door of a county patrol SUV opened, and Sheriff Alicia Stone stepped out, flanked by 2 more deputies. Her arrival instantly recalibrated the situation. A hush settled as the search party parted to allow the sheriff through. A tall, composed woman with years of law enforcement carved into her resolute expression, Sheriff Stone took in the black SUVs, the men in pseudo-civilian gear, the dogs on alert, and the trembling child with her grandmother, all in a single glance. "Colonel," the sheriff began, scanning Mallory's credentials with a cool, discerning eye, "I've already spoken with my deputy here. I understand you claim federal authority, but you're not taking a minor or any animals without a valid court order or a more specific directive than classified government program. Unless you have that, you're trespassing on private property." The colonel's jaw tightened. "Sheriff, I assure you, we have the legal documentation in process. This is a matter of national security. We'll be back with the proper authorization." Sheriff Stone's voice remained level. "Then I look forward to seeing it, Colonel. In the meantime, Ms. Rowan's granddaughter is under her guardianship, and these animals, well, nobody has provided conclusive proof that they're stolen government assets or that they were reported missing in this jurisdiction. If you want to file a complaint, you know where the county offices are." Mallory's nostrils flared slightly. He glanced at Dr. Carter and the cluster of German shepherds, evidently reevaluating the notion of forcibly extracting them under the watchful eyes of local law enforcement and the gathered neighbors. Judging the risk, he pressed his lips into a thin line. "Understood," he said tersely, taking a measured step back. "We'll withdraw for now." He locked eyes with Dr. Carter once more, as if passing a silent warning, then turned on his heel and strode to his SUV. In a synchronized motion, his men also retreated. Engines roared to life, and the vehicles peeled away, leaving behind a swirl of dust and an uneasy quiet. The small crowd gathered around Camilla's porch seemed to collectively exhale. When the immediate tension had dispersed, Mia finally spoke, her voice quavering despite her earlier resolve. "Why do they want Hera and the others, Grandma? Why are they so sure these dogs belong to them?" Sheriff Stone holstered her sidearm. "That's a question we all need answered," she said, fixing her gaze on Dr. Carter and the canines. "And I have a feeling you might be able to shed some light on it, Doctor." Dr. Carter glanced once more at Hera, who stood calmly by Mia's side. A swirl of half-buried knowledge rose within him, old secrets he had tried to forget when he left his military career behind. "I'll explain what I can," he finally said, "but it's more complicated than any of you might guess." Later that night, Camilla Rowan's farmhouse settled into a wary hush as the search party disbanded, and neighbors returned to their homes, satisfied that Mia Dawson was safe, but wary of the unsettling events. Now, only a small group remained in Camilla's living room. Mia, who clutched a warm mug of cocoa, Dr. Elijah Carter, pacing back and forth like a man wrestling with old ghosts. Camilla herself, perched on the edge of her chair, one hand resting protectively on Mia's shoulder. And Sheriff Alicia Stone, her notepad out and pen poised, ready to document a story that seemed stranger by the minute. Samuel Granger lingered by the old grandfather clock, arms crossed over his broad chest, occasionally nodding his agreement or frowning with concern. A local rancher with military experience, he had recognized the hallmarks of advanced training in the dogs almost immediately and refused to leave until he understood more of what was unfolding. At Dr. Carter's feet, Hera lay quietly with her muzzle on her paws, ears flicking now and then when the conversation produced something of note. The other 5 shepherds, Zeus, Artemis, Ares, Thor, and Freya, had taken up positions just outside the porch and around the edges of the property, as though standing sentry. Their silhouettes moved occasionally past the windows, silent guardians who might have vanished into the night if not for the faint glimmer of moonlight reflecting off their tactical vests. Every so often, the living room lights would catch the reflective patches on their gear, intensifying the air of mystery that accompanied them. Dr. Carter finally ceased his pacing near the window, drawing a ragged breath. "I should start by saying," he began quietly, "I recognized Hera because I'd helped with some of her medical training years ago. At the time, I was an Army combat medic assigned to a classified research program focusing on advanced canine units. We took promising military dogs, often German shepherds, sometimes Belgian Malinois, and subjected them to specialized training. But there was more to it than training." He hesitated, seemingly debating how much detail to reveal. "We were also studying certain neurological traits, both in the dogs and in specific humans, that could enable almost direct communication." Granger's brow furrowed. "You're talking about telepathy?" "Not exactly," Dr. Carter clarified, "but close enough in principle that it raised all sorts of ethical questions. The program's name was something like the Nexus Initiative. Over time, it evolved. The dogs you see here, if they are the same group I think they are, were among the most elite. They could operate almost autonomously in combat zones, run reconnaissance, and, in rare instances, form a deep bond with a handler who had a compatible mental profile." Sheriff Stone set down her pen. "And how does an 8-year-old like Mia fit into this picture? These animals showed up from nowhere to protect her. They acted more like a detail assigned to a VIP than typical lost dogs." Mia answered for herself, her gaze flicking to Hera. "I'm not sure, but I sort of feel things from them. It's like they can show me pictures in my head. I know that sounds weird, but I swear it's real." She took a shaky sip of cocoa, clearly trying to sound more confident than she felt. "They showed me how the Colonel's men tried to capture them, and they escaped." Camilla's grip tightened on her granddaughter's shoulder. "Pictures in your head? You've mentioned having an odd connection to animals before, Mia, but never like this." Dr. Carter nodded slowly, lines of worry etched into his face. "That suggests Mia has a very high level of neural receptivity. What the lab once theorized could facilitate direct dog-human concept transmission. In other words, these dogs left their assigned station or facility and came straight to her, possibly guided by some innate sense that she was the perfect match." Sheriff Stone raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess, Colonel Mallory wants them back because they're worth an untold fortune to the government's black budget programs. But from your description, it sounds like there's more to it, like the program might have drifted into morally questionable territory." "It may have," Dr. Carter said, choosing his words carefully. "I left the service when lines started getting blurred about how these dogs and certain gifted individuals would be used. There were rumors about children being involved, children with a particular genetic marker that made them ideal for more direct dog-human connections. I didn't want to be part of that once it became less about rescue and more about weaponization." It was at that moment that Hera rose and patted to Mia. She placed her broad head gently against the child's knee, giving a low whine. Mia stiffened, head tilting as if listening to something others couldn't hear. Her lips parted, eyes flashing with a kind of distant intensity, and then she spoke. "Hera is telling me there was an explosion at the facility where they were kept. Their handlers died, or at least most of them. They ran, but they remember a doctor, a woman, telling them to find me or find someone like me." "Dear God," Camilla whispered. A hush fell over the room as Dr. Carter and Sheriff Stone exchanged an alarmed look. "If that's true," the sheriff said, "then these dogs are carrying vital information about a major incident. No wonder Mallory wants them back so badly. He likely wants to lock down any potential leaks." Samuel Granger cleared his throat, stepping forward. "If these dogs have critical intel, the government might try to hush this up. Mia and Camilla could be in danger just by virtue of these animals choosing to protect them. And if we rely on official channels to expose what happened, we might get stonewalled, or worse." "I think we all know Mallory isn't going to stop," Dr. Carter said, recalling the colonel's cold stare. "He'll be back with the official paperwork and a bigger show of force. He wants the dogs under control, and if Mia is their link to unraveling the program's secrets, he might want her under control too." Sheriff Stone rose from her seat, smoothing a hand across her hair, her expression grave. Legally, if the colonel comes with a warrant or a federal order, my hands are somewhat tied. But I am not about to let them take a child against her will, without absolute proof it's legitimate or that it's safe. Moreover, these animals clearly did some good tonight, helping Mia. I want to hear the rest of their story before we start handing them over. Camilla's eyes brimmed with protective fire. I'm with you, Sheriff. Mia isn't going anywhere unless someone can show me a legal, moral reason that satisfies a grandmother's instincts. At that, Dr. Carter took a deep breath. Camilla, Mia, if you'll allow it, I have a place that's much more secluded. My cabin is off the grid, surrounded by forest. If Colonel Mallory is going to mobilize more men, we need time to figure out what the dogs know. And by know, I mean whatever images or data they're able to share. I have some equipment that might help clarify it. A neural interface from my time in the program's early stages, designed to record these dog-human transmissions. Sheriff Stone studied him warily. Equipment that might be on a classified list, I presume. We can't just move stolen research gear around in the open. But I also see the sense in verifying what's going on. Be careful, Granger warned. If you're harboring these dogs, you risk charges of obstructing a federal investigation or even theft of government property. But we all see how shady this has become. These animals, and Mia, might be the only chance we have to shine a light on what's really happening behind the scenes. Camilla rubbed her temples, torn between the practicalities of living a law-abiding life and the maternal fury that came with protecting her granddaughter. In the end, her family loyalty won out. All right, Dr. Carter, we'll come with you. But if at any point this becomes too dangerous for Mia, I pull out. Understood? Completely, Dr. Carter said, relief mingling with the tension in his voice. We'll leave before dawn. The colonel will be watching, but if we move swiftly, we might slip away without immediate confrontation. Once at my cabin, we can secure the area and see if we can learn more from these dogs. Hera, especially. Sheriff Stone shut her notepad. I'll assist however I can on the local level, but I can't openly declare war on the federal government. I'll try to buy you time, maybe run interference. And Granger, if you can help with your old service contacts, just in case we need backup from folks who understand the nature of these specialized dogs. Please do. Granger nodded resolutely. Whatever it takes. These animals clearly trust Mia, and after witnessing how they handle themselves, I've got no doubt they can hold off anything less than a full squad. But if Mallory escalates, we need a plan. Camilla drew Mia closer. Outside, the soft nighttime hush was peppered with the presence of watchful German shepherds, each posted with a silent vigilance that proved they understood far more than any typical animal. Mia gazed into Hera's eyes, then turned to the adults. Hera says they're ready whenever we are. She's not afraid. The others, they're coordinating. We're safer with them around than without them. Something in the child's tone, a gentle certainty, brought a final hush to the room. Dr. Carter felt a wave of conviction wash over him. Whatever doubts he had about re-entering the shadowy world of advanced military programs, he couldn't turn away. Not now, not when it appeared these dogs carried a secret that could jeopardize an innocent family, and possibly many more lives. The time for indecision had passed. True to their plan, Dr. Elijah Carter, Camilla, Mia, and the 6 German shepherds departed Cedar Grove Farm in the first light of dawn, when the sky was a hazy gray and the long swaths of valley mist still clung to the fields. Sheriff Stone took pains to keep any official watchers occupied, discreetly positioning a patrol vehicle near one of the main roads leading out of the valley. By the time Colonel Mallory or his men realized Mia and the dogs had vanished, the small convoy was already cutting through back roads and old logging routes into the denser pine forests that bordered Ravenwood Valley. Dr. Carter's cabin, an unconventional dwelling he had bought precisely for its seclusion, sat tucked at the foot of Cedar Hill, a steep and craggy rise that overshadowed a thick stretch of timberland. The property's perimeter bristled with hidden security cameras, motion sensors, and even reinforced fencing in certain strategic spots. When they finally arrived, Mia stared at the rugged cabin with wide eyes. It was larger than she expected, made of heavy logs, and boasted a solar array on the roof that hinted at how self-sufficient it was. Camilla, stepping out of the truck, took in the heavily barricaded windows with a wary sense that she was stepping into a fortress rather than a home. While the morning sun crept higher, Dr. Carter guided them through the cabin's interior. It was surprisingly comfortable, if sparse. The living area featured functional furniture and a broad fireplace, while the walls were lined with thick shelving units. One corner of the space was dominated by a state-of-the-art medical setup that would have been more at home in an emergency clinic: vitals monitors, well-stocked trauma kits, intravenous supplies, and even a small defibrillator. On an adjacent table sat electronic equipment that Camilla didn't recognize: black metal boxes bristling with cables, a laptop wired to a panel of blinking lights, and a specialized helmet-like device that looked faintly ominous. "This is the neural interface I mentioned," Dr. Carter explained, resting a hand on the helmet contraption. "It was a prototype from the time I consulted with the Nexus Initiative. It's designed to record real-time neural impulses when the dogs are transmitting images or sensations, then project that data onto a monitor. The official labs had far more advanced versions of this by the time I left, but this unit should still help us understand what the dogs are trying to show us." Mia clung to Camilla's side, staring at the neural interface with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Hera nudged Mia's elbow as if encouraging her to step forward. Camilla frowned. "And you want to put that on my granddaughter's head?" Her maternal protectiveness was in full force. "It's non-invasive," Dr. Carter said reassuringly. "It doesn't send signals into Mia's brain. It only reads the electromagnetic patterns. The only risk is mild disorientation, headache, or emotional stress, especially if what the dogs share is traumatic. But we'll monitor her carefully, and she can stop any time." Mia swallowed, glancing at Hera. I want to try," she whispered. "Hera keeps saying there are things we all need to see. She doesn't want to just show me. She wants everyone to understand. I can be, like a bridge." Camilla knelt in front of Mia, smoothing the child's golden hair away from her face. "Are you sure, sweetheart? It's okay if you don't want to do this." "I'm sure," Mia replied in a small but determined voice. "The dogs found me in the forest. I think that happened for a reason." Tension etched lines in Camilla's forehead, but she nodded, conceding to her granddaughter's resolve. Meanwhile, the other shepherds, Zeus, Artemis, Ares, Thor, and Freya, had fanned out around the cabin. They prowled near windows and doorways, scanning the tree line as if anticipating trouble. Their quiet discipline was both remarkable and unnerving. Ordinary dogs would have sniffed corners or flopped down on rugs. These animals were more akin to an elite security team, always vigilant. After double-checking the system's settings, Dr. Carter guided Mia to a small chair and carefully placed the neural interface over her head. She winced slightly at the cold metal of the sensors, but Hera pressed closer, resting her chin on Mia's lap as if to comfort her. "I'll begin the scan," Dr. Carter said, voice hushed. "If you feel dizzy, just say so." All eyes flicked to the computer monitor. At first, it displayed only wave-like lines indicating baseline brain activity. But then a burst of color rippled across the screen, morphing into shapes and half-formed images. Mia's eyes fluttered shut, and her breathing grew shallow. Hera stood absolutely still, her gaze fixed on the child. Slowly, forms coalesced on the display. At first, they were fleeting glimpses: a sprawling underground facility, white corridors shining under fluorescent lights, steel doors locked with passcodes, rows of kennels and labs. Men and women in lab coats, some wearing military-style uniforms, supervised the movement of dogs that looked similar to Hera and her companions. Next came an image of a group of children, no older than Mia, some even younger, connected to advanced machines. Then an explosion, thick smoke billowing through corridors, alarms blaring, red emergency lights casting everything in a dizzying pall. Finally, a desperate flight through the chaos. Mia made a soft sound of distress, tears pricking the corners of her eyes as she relived Hera's memories. Camilla hovered behind her, hands clenched. "Mia," she whispered urgently. "Is she all right?" Dr. Carter checked the readouts. "Her vitals are steady, just elevated. She's experiencing intense emotional content from the dogs. It'll pass soon. We should let her finish." Camilla nearly pulled the interface off Mia's head, but Hera glanced up, gave a gentle, reassuring whimper, and somehow that calmed the older woman enough to let Mia continue. On the monitor, more images flowed. A woman with tired eyes and a sympathetic face appeared. She wore a lab coat and was guiding the dogs down a dark corridor. Dr. Carter recognized her from old photos. "That's Dr. Yasmin Lin," he muttered. "She was part of the early ethical oversight team, one of the few who questioned the direction of the program. It looks like she helped them escape when the explosion happened. New images showed a map-like structure. An arrow pointed from the damaged facility to a mountainous region miles away. Another scene, an outbuilding or old mine entrance, half buried in rubble, where Dr. Lin appeared to be hiding, injured and alone. The images were overlaid with a sense of urgency, danger pressing in from all sides. Suddenly Mia gasped and opened her eyes. She tore the neural interface off and flung her arms around Hera's neck. "She's hurt," the child sobbed, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Dr. Lin is alive, but she's hurt, and there are others. They're holding them somewhere else, deeper underground. There are more kids like me that they want to use for something." Camilla stood in stunned silence, stroking Mia's back. Granger, who had been watching with the grim detachment of a soldier, now let out a long breath. So, it wasn't just some advanced dog training. They were experimenting on children too, trying to find those with a genetic trait that could bond with the dogs mentally. This is bigger than we thought. Dr. Carter helped Mia out of the chair. "It confirms a lot of what I suspected when I left the service. That means Colonel Mallory and his associates likely have an entire covert operation under the banner of national security. If the dogs and Dr. Lin can prove it, if they can expose these illegal experiments, Mallory's entire chain of command might be implicated." Camilla, cheeks pale, gathered Mia into her arms. "Then we have to help Dr. Lin and those children." She shot a pointed look at Dr. Carter. "Surely you agree?" Dr. Carter's lips pressed into a thin line. "Yes, I do, but we'll need proof, hard evidence that can't just be swept under the rug. We have the data from this interface recording, plus the dogs themselves. If we can find Dr. Lin, she could confirm everything. The question is, can we do it before Mallory tracks us down?" A dog's sharp bark from outside interrupted the conversation. Through the window, Granger spotted Freya, tail raised in warning. Within seconds, the other shepherds joined her at the edge of the tree line. "We might be out of time," Granger said, voice low. "Someone's approaching." Cautiously, Dr. Carter switched monitors to a feed from hidden motion sensor cameras. 4 armed figures, moving in practice stealth, advanced through the forest. They wore dark gear, no identifying patches, and carried rifles with a silhouette reminiscent of tranquilizer weaponry. "Mallory didn't wait for a warrant," Camilla breathed. "He sent a tactical team instead." No one spoke for several tense seconds as the monitors showed the intruders' approach. From years of combat experience, Samuel Granger recognized their discipline. Single-file movement, spaced out to minimize losses if ambushed, scanning tree lines with professional vigilance. They were no novices. Behind them, the pines rustled in a faint morning breeze, concealing the dogs' exact positions. On screen, Hera, Artemis, Ares, Thor, Freya, and Zeus drifted silently among the foliage, herding the team deeper into a specific patch of undergrowth near the southern boundary of Dr. Carter's land. "They're funneling those men," Granger noted. "The dogs are orchestrating the team's path without them even noticing. They're creating a kill box." Mia, too young to fully understand the term, but perceptive enough to grasp the gravity, paled. Camilla placed her hands on the child's shoulders and gently turned her away from the screens. "We don't want them hurt," Mia whispered worriedly. "Just stopped." Dr. Carter exhaled. "These dogs have been trained for non-lethal takedowns too. If that's what they decide to do, they'll do it swiftly. I've seen the agility tests firsthand. They can incapacitate a human before you can blink." Granger, weapons slung over his shoulder, asked, "What's our role? We can't exactly sit here if shooting starts. Should we call Sheriff Stone?" "Not yet," Dr. Carter decided. "She'll be pinned by official channels if we bring her into a firefight, and Mallory could claim we were resisting arrest. The dogs might handle this. If we see any sign that they're outmatched, we'll intervene." Outside, the intruders slowed, scanning with night vision optics despite the rising dawn. They must have guessed Dr. Carter's property would be fortified, but they hadn't accounted for the cunning of 6 dogs that had once been part of an elite operation. Zeus padded behind a fallen log, muzzle low, while Thor and Freya flanked the group from the east. Artemis moved in from the west, ensuring no easy escape route. Ares circled around to block the path behind them, and in the center of it all, Hera waited, invisible among dense ferns, her scarred muzzle lifted slightly in the breeze. Then it happened with a suddenness that took everyone's breath away. One of the operatives let out a startled curse. Before he could raise his tranquilizer rifle, two shepherds, Artemis and Thor, launched from cover. Thor snapped the rifle from the man's hands while Artemis tackled him to the ground, using just enough force to knock the wind out of him. Another operative spun to aim at them, only to be blindsided by Ares, who deftly clamped onto his forearm, forcing him to drop his weapon. Meanwhile, Freya bounded in from behind, nipping the man's leg in a controlled manner that made him buckle. Two more intruders remained. One stepped back to fire, but Hera charged forward in a blur of muscle, her teeth locked onto the tranquilizer gun, twisting it from his grip. A second later, Zeus swooped in to slam him to the ground, pressing a massive paw onto his chest. Within moments, all four intruders lay sprawled in the damp pine needles, each pinned or cornered by a dog that had used carefully measured force to disarm them. The dogs had not torn into them viciously. They simply subdued them as though it were a routine exercise. Dr. Carter and Granger, who had watched through the camera feed, exchanged stunned glances. "Incredible," Granger murmured. "They coordinated that with more precision than some of the best special ops teams I've seen." Camilla, though relieved no lethal force seemed to have been used, shuddered at the brutal efficiency. "Let's go secure them," Dr. Carter declared, unholstering a sidearm he hoped he wouldn't have to use. Mia clung to Camilla's hand, following at a brisk pace as they headed outside into the crisp mountain air. By the time they reached the southern clearing, the dogs had herded the four men into a tight group. Hera stood guard, baring her teeth in a silent threat that promised dire consequences if any of them tried to move. Each man wore dark tactical gear, and up close, Dr. Carter could see the advanced weaponry they'd been carrying. Specialized dart guns loaded with tranquilizers, strong enough to fell not only animals, but humans as well. "Let me guess," Dr. Carter said, drawing close enough to address them. "Colonel Mallory sent you to recover the dogs and any collateral." He glanced pointedly at Mia. The lead operative, a stocky man with close-cropped hair, gave nothing but a glare, but after a moment of Hera's low growl, he tried to negotiate, speaking through clenched teeth. "You're making a mistake," he hissed. "These dogs are property of a classified program. You're harboring them in an asset child. The colonel has every right—" Camilla cut him off. "Don't you dare call my granddaughter an asset child. She's not your property. Neither are these dogs." Granger rummaged through the men's gear, tossing aside their rifles, earpieces, and any potential tracking devices. One small device beeped faintly, presumably a transponder. He ripped it free, smashed it under his boot, and then scanned for more. "They can't radio for backup immediately," he said, satisfied. Mia stared at the intruders with an expression that was a mixture of fear and sadness. "You came to hurt my friends," she said, voice quivering. "They didn't hurt you, though. They just stopped you." One of the men pinned beneath Zeus spat at the ground. "You don't understand. These dogs are extremely dangerous. And the girl, she's what the colonel needs to continue the next phase of the program." Dr. Carter exchanged a quick look with Granger. This operative had practically confirmed that Mia's unique ability was crucial to Mallory's objectives. He tightened his grip on his sidearm. "You're going to remain here as our guests for a while. We can't let you go back to Mallory until we figure out how to safeguard Mia and the dogs." "You're just digging yourself a deeper hole, Doctor," snapped another operative. "You once served the cause. Now you're standing in direct opposition. The colonel will level charges of treason if that's what it takes." Camilla pressed a hand to Mia's ear, protective instincts flaring. "That's enough. We're not harming you, but you'll stay put." In short order, Dr. Carter directed the dogs to stand down, while still keeping the men under watch. It amazed him how instantly Hera, Artemis, Ares, Thor, Freya, and Zeus adjusted their formation, like a well-oiled tactical unit responding to new orders. The men were corralled toward a secured outbuilding on Dr. Carter's property, originally meant for storage, but adapted with strong locks and barred windows. They would be locked inside until a better plan emerged. Through it all, Mia watched with quiet tension, sometimes glancing at Hera and looking lost in thought. Finally, as they marched the men away, Mia touched Dr. Carter's sleeve. "Hera wants me to tell you something," she murmured. "There's a bigger plan the colonel has. It's not just about them wanting me for my ability. He's trying to expand the entire program. More dogs, more kids. If we don't expose this, more families will lose their children to that place." Dr. Carter's expression darkened. He had suspected the colonel's aspirations were grand, but hearing it confirmed in such stark terms made the risk all the more dire. "Then we'll have to stop him," he said softly, "before he finds a way to escalate this into something beyond our power to contain." Several hours later, the group reconvened inside Dr. Carter's cabin, around a large wooden table scratched with the marks of a rugged, practical life. Mia and Camilla sat side by side, while Samuel Granger hovered nearby, finishing his inspection of the newly improvised holding area. Through a window, one could just make out the shadowy silhouette of the building where the 4 captured intruders were now locked up. The German shepherds alternated between patrolling outside and checking in with Mia, particularly Hera, who rarely let the child out of her sight. With tensions calmer, Dr. Carter put a phone on the table, screen glowing faintly as he explained a plan. "I've got an encrypted line we might use to contact an old colleague, Dr. Nathan Lawrence, who was one of the original heads of the Nexus Initiative before Colonel Mallory took over. If Dr. Lawrence is still out there and still concerned about the ethical ramifications, he might help us get the evidence we need to blow the lid off this entire program." Camilla looked from the phone to Mia, an edge of fear creeping back into her voice. "Evidence is crucial, I understand that. But what about Dr. Lin, the woman we saw in the interface recordings? If she's injured and in hiding, and if those other children are still in the facility, we can't ignore that." Mia, her hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm cocoa, nodded solemnly. "Hera told me Dr. Lin is the reason they all got away. She sabotaged something in the facility to create the explosion as a diversion. Most of the dogs got out, but apparently many children did not. Hera and the others were told to find someone who could share their story with the outside world, someone who had the same mental ability Dr. Lin was trying to protect." Granger drummed his fingers on the table. "And that someone ended up being Mia. The Colonel likely has files on her, even if indirectly, which is why he's so determined to get her back. If he perfects the link using Mia's stronger abilities, the program becomes unstoppable." Dr. Carter pinched the bridge of his nose, tension throbbing. "First, we should extract Dr. Lin, if possible. Her testimony, combined with whatever data we can pull from these dogs' neural transmissions, would be huge. And second, we find a safe channel, maybe Dr. Lawrence, to bring it to someone in government who won't try to bury it. That's a tall order. Mallory's pulling the strings at a high level." "Where is this Dr. Lin?" Camilla asked. From across the room, Hera padded in, as if sensing the conversation had reached a turning point. She approached Mia and pressed her muzzle gently against the girl's knee. Mia closed her eyes, and after a moment of stillness, she opened them again. "She's hiding in an old mining camp near the southern border, about a few hours from here," Mia said, voice shaking slightly. "It's remote, but Mallory's men know she might be there. She doesn't have much time." Granger let out a low whistle. "We'd be driving right into potential conflict, and we have a child involved." Mia's small hand clenched into a fist. "I'm going. Hera says Dr. Lin won't trust anyone else, not fully. She can sense that I've got the same connection, and the dogs do too. We have to help her, or we'll never get the proof we need." Camilla stiffened, but, recalling her granddaughter's earlier resolve, she recognized the sense in it. Mia was key to bridging the gap between Dr. Lin's knowledge, the dog's memories, and any outside authority. "I'll go too," she stated. "I won't let Mia go alone." Dr. Carter exhaled. "Then let's plan for an extraction. We'll split into a small group traveling by a less obvious route, while the dogs provide escort. Another group can remain here, hold the property, and keep an eye on the prisoners. But no," Mia cut in. "Hera says the dogs need to stay together. They communicate best as a unit, and Dr. Lin will trust them more if they arrive in full. We can't break them up unless absolutely necessary. They're stronger that way." Even Granger, who once prided himself on following standard tactical doctrines, couldn't deny the uncanny synergy he'd witnessed from these canines. "All right, keep them together. But we can't leave these men locked in your outbuilding. Eventually, Colonel Mallory will realize they're missing. He'll send more." Dr. Carter rubbed the back of his neck, wishing he had a simple answer. "We might temporarily move them deeper into the mountains, somewhere Mallory won't immediately check. Or we contact Sheriff Stone again, see if she can officially detain them for trespassing and attempted kidnapping. That might be safer legally, though it risks them being claimed by federal authority once Mallory shows up with the right documents." Granger glanced at Camilla, who nodded. "Do it. Sheriff Stone is still a lawful authority in Ravenwood County. At least, if the men are in her custody, we're not involved in holding them illegally. With that decided, Dr. Carter excused himself to retrieve the phone and place an encrypted call to the sheriff, explaining the situation in low tones. Sheriff Stone, after much reluctance and concern for the legal repercussions, agreed to quietly take custody of the men, reasoning that any legitimate operation wouldn't mind local jail cells if they planned to claim jurisdiction. The men, under sedation from the dog's earlier skirmish, wouldn't be in a position to protest much. Meanwhile, Camilla gathered supplies for the coming trip: first aid kits, flashlights, a few changes of clothing for Mia, and minimal personal items. Hera watched her, occasionally sniffing the bag, as if verifying they had all they needed. Mia sat by the fireplace, absently petting Artemis's ears, lost in contemplation. Whenever her gaze flicked to Dr. Carter or Camilla, it held a kind of stoic bravery that felt far beyond her 8 years. Within 2 hours, Sheriff Stone arrived with a pair of deputies in plain vehicles. They loaded the subdued intruders, now thoroughly disarmed and lacking any means to call Mallory, into the back of a police truck. The sheriff and her deputies exchanged uncertain looks at the 6 German shepherds stalking around the yard, but no one voiced an objection. Stone only said, "You're going to do what you think is right, Doctor. Just make sure it's within the boundaries of survival. I doubt Mallory or his people are going to worry about friendly tactics anymore. They'll escalate." "Doctor." Carter nodded. "Thank you, Sheriff. We'll be off property within an hour. Once we get to Dr. Lin, assuming we make contact, we'll gather everything we need to blow this operation wide open." "One more thing," Sheriff Stone added, lowering her voice. "I can only protect Camilla and Mia from an immediate public extraction. If Mallory gets the legal system behind him, I can't hold him off forever. Make your move fast." Camilla, overhearing, drew Mia near. "We will," she promised. "We're not letting him trap us." With that, the law enforcement vehicles departed, the 4 captured operatives effectively out of the immediate picture. The day was growing late, golden Montana sunlight filtering through the pines, creating a lattice of light and shadow across Dr. Carter's property. As everyone loaded into 2 vehicles, Dr. Carter's truck and another smaller SUV borrowed from Granger, Mia climbed into the back seat with Hera, Zeus, and Artemis. The other dogs would follow in the bed or run alongside as needed, though Dr. Carter suspected they'd mostly ride quietly if no immediate threat loomed. Before starting the engine, Dr. Carter took a lingering look at his cabin. Part of him believed he might never see it again in one piece. Not if Mallory truly committed to retrieving these extraordinary canines and the precious child who held the key to their mental network. He knew that once they left, Mallory could well trace them, or at least attempt it. But this was no time for half measures. Dr. Carter had spent years doing nothing, burying his conscience in quiet isolation. Now, he finally had a cause worth fighting for. As the engines roared to life, Mia turned to Camilla with a flicker of a smile. "I'm okay," she said softly, answering the unspoken question in her grandmother's worried glance. Hera rested her head on Mia's lap, big dark eyes reflecting the child's steady determination. Camilla swallowed hard, heart aching but full of pride. For all her efforts to keep Mia safe, it was her granddaughter's unusual bond with these dogs that might end up saving others from a dire fate. With the vehicles rolling down the gravel path, the rest of the dogs maintained a protective formation. Dr. Carter and Granger had set their route. They'd take old logging roads south, cross into the mountainous region near the border, and locate the abandoned mining camp. If they could find Dr. Lin and confirm she was alive and in possession of incriminating data, they might have the perfect puzzle piece to unmask Colonel Mallory's shadowy operation. Mia's neural interface recordings would serve as additional evidence: clear visuals of children in cages, unethical experiments, and a facility that no legitimate government program would ever publicly acknowledge. Yes, it was dangerous. Yes, Mallory would come at them with every resource his rank allowed. But they had the bond between Mia and 6 of the most elite, cognitively advanced canines in existence. They had allies like Sheriff Stone and the potential contact Dr. Lawrence might provide. They had moral courage on their side, fueled by the knowledge that every mile they drove brought them closer to rescuing innocent children and stopping a twisted project that had claimed too many lives already. As Dr. Carter pressed the accelerator, Dust kicked up behind the truck, and the imposing forms of Hera, Zeus, Artemis, Ares, Thor, and Freya rose in the rearview mirror. Inside the cabin, Mia murmured something to Hera that only the dog could truly understand, but the gist was clear. We're going to make this right. Outside, the late afternoon sun washed over the pine-laden hills, as though trying to offer a final blessing on their journey. The mission was set, and in that shared purpose, man, child, and dogs together, they discovered a unity of spirit more powerful than any fear Mallory's forces could bring. They would not rest until Lynn was found, until the captive children were freed, and until the truth about Project Nexus was exposed for all to see. If it was up to them, Ravenwood Valley would soon become the spark that lit a fire of accountability, revealing that even the most elite war dogs, trained for the harshest battlefields, could choose compassion and humanity over blind obedience. And for 8-year-old Mia Dawson, that choice would forever change her destiny, proving that courage could bloom in the unlikeliest corners of the Montana wilderness, illuminated by the unwavering loyalty of 6 extraordinary German shepherds bound by an unbreakable bond.